Welcome to Market Like It's Hot, the podcast where strategy sizzles and marketing nonsense goes to die. I'm Yasmin Robles here with Izzy Dodosky from Rebel Marketing, and around here, we are not just glorifying burnout, chasing trends for sport, or pretending busy equals effective. We talk about what actually works and what needs to be left behind. Today, we're joined by Ashley Burton-Mims, founder and CEO of Emerald and Rose Consulting. Ashley helps leaders and mission-driven organizations recognize and respond to burnout with intention, compassion, and practical tools. With nearly 2 decades of corporate leadership experience and a unique perspective shaped by her work in postpartum care, she brings a real conversation about capacity, visibility, and what sustainable leadership actually looks like. Welcome, Ashley, to the show.
Thank you. Such a beautiful introduction.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am Ashley Burton-Mims, founder and CEO of Emerald and Rose Consulting. I previously, like you said, had a pretty beautiful career in corporate retail, but I also burned out several times over. And as part of my healing journey, I recognized that it wasn't just me. It was me and a lot of women who look like me, my mentors included, when I was like, hey, I had to take a medical leave of absence because this was too much. They're like, oh yeah, I've done that before. And I'm like, what? Why are we not talking about this? And why is it happening? And what can we do about it? So that got my wheels turning very much so to see like what research I could do and understanding what burnout looks like, why it's happening, especially to women of color, and what are some practical ways we can take care of ourselves in the meantime. A little bit more about me, sorry. Because I always tell people, it's like, it's not just about the like business side. I am an avid audiobook reader and traveler. So those are just a couple other little fun nuggets about me.
What audiobook have you listened to recently that's worth listening to?
I am so that's worth listening to. The last book I read was called Original Sins, and it is about the systemic racism that has impacted Native Americans, Indigenous folks, and Black people, in the way that schooling kind of really has taught us to be good, to conform, how it's not really set up for folks that aren't white. So it was a very interesting read. I highly recommend it. It touches on so many systemic things that I also overlap with things that I do in my work. One of them is about rest, and how that was oftentimes looked at as laziness and instead of respite for your body. And so this causes us to overwork and to feel like if we're not doing something, if we're not productive, we are lazy. So it was a hard read as far as like it being a little on the heavier side, but it was a beautiful read from an education and informative standpoint. So that's the one I would recommend. And I just finished reading it last week.
Awesome. I'm pretty sure that's on my Goodreads list right now too. I was like on my want to read. So I'm glad it was good. So I'll bump that one up then.
Yes, it has like an apple on the cover.
Yeah.
So yes.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, you have worked in Fortune 500 leadership and now focus on burnout and sustainability. What did you see firsthand that made you realize something wasn't working?
Not being believed, like just trying to show up and do my best every day and still saying like you could be doing more, but not in a like negative way. In a, I've done all these things, I've taken on extra work and extra projects, and I'm not necessarily moving forward in my career in the way that I was anticipating. And it was like, well, just work harder and do more outside of the scope of your role, and then we'll reward you. And that didn't happen. And I realized it didn't happen for a lot of folks. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot in my work is setting healthy boundaries. And I wish I had known that before. So if I had set some different type of boundaries, I probably wouldn't have stayed in some of the organizations as long as I would have and advocated for myself a little bit differently.
Yeah, definitely. You also talk a lot about burnout and mission driven work. Why do you think the people doing the most meaningful work are often the most burnt out?
Oh, so similar reasons,
Mm-hmm.
similar with the boundaries, like, because we want to do everything for everyone, especially in heart center work. I find myself doing it as well. Um, I actually just was at a roundtable about this a couple weeks ago where nonprofit leaders are getting together and saying, hey, we're burned out, but we don't even have the tools to combat it. We don't even know where to go. We're trying to get funding and the funding isn't coming through. And then we're trying to get funding to help us support us so we're not burned out. And we're just kind of going in a circle and having to continually prove ourselves to investors, to foundations that have all of this capital. But they're saying, well, prove it, prove that you can't do this with the little bit of like dangly carrot that I'm putting in front of you. But I think at the bottom line is really when we're doing heart center work, we care and care so much, and then we kind of like overexert ourselves and put everyone else in front of us, and then we're stepped back and we're like, ugh, I. I've I've overexerted myself and now I'm depleted and now where do I go? And it's really, really hard to move forward when when you're in that space.
Definitely.
Yeah, so okay, so let's pivot a little bit into that burnout and in the marketing culture, I guess. Hustle culture is still very loud in marketing. So, my question, where do you see it showing up in ways that are actually harming founders and leaders?
Ooh, that's such a good question. It's I don't know if you guys have seen, there's some videos, there's like a guy, he's like, I get up at 4 a.m.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
work out and I do, and I'm like, okay, cool, but like your body also needs rest and sleep. But like when they're telling us like we have to do all these things in order to be successful and to make money and to be happy, I think that's where the issue lies. Is there's still, like you said, predominantly hustle culture out there that's saying like sleep when you die,
Mhm.
things like that. Even I work a lot with the tech community here, and sometimes when I'm speaking to tech founders, it's really difficult to get that point across as well because all they're seeing around them is that you get what you put into your work versus actually
Yeah.
you get a lot more and be more effective if you took breaks and rested. But that's not the narrative that's out there. And thank you for this conversation today to really start to put that more for that narrative out there that rest is actually how you're more effective. You can do more. You can daydream. You can be more efficient with your work when you have rested because you're not fighting against your body to say like I have to show up, I have to show up, I have to show up, and you're actually make prone to make more mistakes when you're overtired and overexerting yourself. There are so many ways to be successful and also rest.
Yeah, I'm reading a book right now called, well, not reading, it's an audiobook, Radical Senora Era. And it's basically I think the whole premise, as far as I've gotten in the book, is you gotta rest. But there's all of these little, I guess you could call them nuances about the Latin culture and being a female in a Latin culture, as well as being in the United States. And now these different cultures kind of collide and everything is just kind of hustle, hustle, hustle. But that sometimes doesn't benefit us. And going back to not going back to our roots, but more of like going back to finding out what really fills our cup, and trying to make sure that, hey, let's not answer those emails when you're supposed to be resting. Um, yeah. So a lot of the founders that I've met, a lot of founders in general, I think they think they need to be visible all of the time in order to grow their audience or grow their company. Where does that visibility, or where do you think that visibility crosses the line into depletion?
No, I love this question because I too have felt this because they tell us, and that's like, oh, you have to post a certain amount of times, look at your algorithms and things like that. As a solopreneur myself, I found myself almost burning out trying to keep up with just posting and creating original content. And I had to take a step back and say, one, people are going to discover me either way. Like it could be something I recently posted or something that I posted months ago. And how do I honor myself in this work? So I had to scale back a lot in my own work because it just wasn't sustainable for me to do that. So I know there are some ways that people will say, like, I have my social media calendar and I work off of that. I have different SOPs in place and I work off of that. And I love that. But I think as a founder, you have to really take a moment and reassess often to say, like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm grinding, I'm doing this, but what I'm missing out on by forcing this visibility?
For sure. Agree with all of that. You talk about leadership sustainability. What does that actually look like in practice and not just in theory?
Oh, I love this. So one of the big things that I talk to leaders about often is what Yasmin talked about a little bit was responding to emails and our communication. So we're really setting the stage for our teams to understand our accessibility. So if I am responding to an email at 10, 11 o'clock at night, I'm also showing to my team that I don't value their time and their time at home with their families versus doing a scheduled send email later. If I'm also telling my team, hey, it's okay for you to take PTO and go on vacation, but I, as the leader, am not taking PTO and going on vacation, there's a mismatch there. So I work a lot with leaders on understanding taking time off, setting healthy boundaries, checking in with their team, and also empowering their team. Is there a meeting you go to every week that there's someone who's ready for next? You could start sending that person to the team. That's huge. You're showing them that you trust them, but you're also freeing up some bandwidth for yourself. And really checking in and understanding what your capacity looks like. I often use this phrase instead of just saying, no, I can't do that. I'll say, I don't have the capacity to do that right now. But I will have capacity later on this week or tomorrow or whatever that time period is. And really making sure as leaders we're saying that and checking in with our teams on their capacity. So those are some of the ways that I work with leaders to understand like what sustainable leadership looks like. How do we combat burnout? We know that we have all these items on our checklist. The checklist is never ending, but how do we really reprioritize and take a step back and say, like, do I really need to do all of those things? Is there something I can delegate to someone? Can we ask for help? And can we say no?
So Yasmin and I shouldn't be slacking each other at 8 p.m.? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, if that is what you have agreed upon, then yes. But I want to say, like, if we say our hours are 9 to 4, 9 to 5, and I'm slacking you at 8 p.m., could that wait until the next day? Could I put it on if I have to really send it, is there a way for me to delay the send?
So, question on that, what would be the best? So, I mean, typically it's like 9 to 5, right? That's a typical workday. But sometimes some of us work better, let's say at night, or let's say my daytime, I was busy with the kids, and then I hop back on at night. And what I request is that everyone adjust their settings in Slack so that they don't get notifications, because sometimes it's just stuff in my brain and I need to get it out. Or is it better to just assume that they are reading the notifications and schedule them?
I would say the latter, because
Yeah.
though we tell people not to check them or to have them set up, because you're leading a team, they probably are going to respond.
Yeah.
And it's you mean well, and I do too, right? Like I definitely work better in the evenings also, and I catch myself saying like, oh, okay, I shouldn't send this at 11 o'clock at night. Let me just schedule send. So there's a way to address it in that way, and then also talk to them and check in and ask them, when I'm sending this, are you checking it? And that way it helps you understand more too. Even though we're saying like, hey, don't check it, they probably are still checking it, just because they respect you and they want to make sure that they're doing a good job.
It's true.
How can leaders redistribute emotional labor within their teams without feeling like they're dropping the ball?
Okay. I love this question. I will answer that question, and I also will recommend another book called Emotional Labor, since we're all nerding out on books over here. That one's just a beautiful read. But redistributing emotional labor to their team without feeling like they're dropping the ball. I mean, the first thing is to be intentional and to be transparent. I think there's this thought sometimes that we can't share things with our team as far as like what some deadlines and deliverables are, or if somebody's putting a lot of pressure on us to do something. Whereas if we're a little bit more transparent and intentional about that, and then we can work together collaboratively to figure out like, okay, do we really need to turn this thing in today, or could it get moved to next week? Is this something we actually need to continue to do? I know for me, I'm big on process improvement. So really taking that step back to say like, okay, we're starting to do this. For me, it was a newsletter in my business. So I'm like, okay, I'm starting to do this newsletter. I have to do it once a month. But then what do I need to table in order to do that? So for me, it was, okay, I'm not going to post as much, or I can't have 7 coffee chats in a week. So it's just finding a, I don't like to use the word balance because it's really hard to find balance, but just a redistribution of our time to say, okay, I've now reprioritized this thing, so I need to be intentional about taking something else off. I hope I answered your question, because you were talking more about emotional labor and I was talking more tactically.
I thought it answered the question still, so
okay.
I'm okay with it. What's one small shift a founder or leader could make this week to reduce burnout?
I love this. If you can, a slow morning. I have, as part of my healing, I decided that I was not going to meet with folks before 10 a.m. My day used to look like I had a small child, and at the time it was just my kiddo and myself. And I'd get up, get dressed, take them to school, and start my day. And then pick them up, make dinner. So I really wasn't getting any time to myself till like 10, 11 p.m. And then I'd stay up even later because I like, this is finally my time. And now I've switched it. I do still stay up to 10, 11 o'clock, but that's also because there's like shows that I want to watch. But I prioritize myself first now. So how do you put yourself first in the morning? I still have to take the kiddo to school. And so in that time between taking them to school and getting my day started, like outwardly facing, for me, it's 10 o'clock. Actually, last summer was like my first summer break. And I moved it to 11. So I just, in that time, I either like make myself breakfast, I'll listen to a book or a podcast, I'll go for a walk, I'll lay back down and go to sleep sometimes. But whatever it is, I'm making sure it's something that's solely for myself. So let's say I get back home from dropping them off around 8:30. So it's about an hour and a half of time. So it's not like the whole day, but like, could it be, you could start at 15 minutes and build up upon that. I actually recommend starting at 15 minutes. So what's something you can do for 15 minutes and start to build up to that hour and a half time period. So for 15 minutes, could you, as a ritual, make yourself some coffee instead of as a chore, right? Or tea? Could you, I know this is going to sound silly, stop and smell the roses or look out the window. I know it sounds very woo-woo, but it is such a great way to start your day. I actually saw someone, I decided to take myself out on a little day adventure to Ann Arbor on Sunday. And I was walking and I was just like, oh, I'm exploring the city. And there's a lady who was very adamant about these flowers. She's like, you guys have to see these flowers. And at first I was like, what's going on? But what she was showing us is there are these flowers that only bloom when it's spring. And technically it's not spring yet. And so she was like, oh my gosh, these flowers, you can only see them for like 2 or 3 days, and they're not even going to make it to spring. But like when we don't slow down enough to notice these things, like we're really missing out on life. And it made my day. I like went to where I was going, and then I came back and I took pictures, and then I started looking up the flowers, and I'm like, how could I plant these flowers in my house somewhere? Like, so just taking those moments to really slow down and to check in with yourself and prioritize yourself in the day.
Yeah. So you bring a unique lens as a postpartum doula as well. How has that shaped the way you think about capacity and leadership, if at all?
Ooh, in so many ways. So becoming a postpartum doula, I didn't realize until I had this space that I'm in right now, how much that has been like a dream of mine. I've always been excited and interested in our maternal health. I love little people. I love helping women and empowering women. And I'm like, the light bulb clicked for me one day. I was like, oh, there's literally a role for me to do that. So it's really changed in a couple ways. So one, I learned about matrescence, which is the time period that you're in right now, Yasmin, where we are transitioning from being a woman, being a lot of different hats into motherhood. And there is no guidebook. There is no, there are books, but this is you, between you and your little baby. And that looks very different for everyone. But it also can be such a lonely and isolating time, especially if you don't have community. And we're actually historically meant to live in community, especially when we have babies. We used to have an aunt or a grandmother figure that lived really close to us and could help us to say, like, okay, you're trying to get the baby to sleep, and here's what's worked for me before, or let me take care of the baby so you can take care of yourself. So we've also like come really far away from being in community. How many of us actually know our neighbors? How many of us know our neighbors enough to trust them to take care of us and our baby? And how do we take care of ourselves during this time? And how do we ask for help? So those were all things that really piqued my interest in becoming a postpartum doula. I was like, I remember even I lived in New York City when I had my kid, and very funny story. She was 3 weeks old. I was looking for a community, and I drove to Midtown, actually the Upper West Side, to go to the JCC. I did not know what the JCC was. So I show up and I was like, oh, Jewish Community Center. Okay. And I was very well welcomed, but the ladies there were like, oh, there's probably a group just like this, like actually where you live versus you like trekking all the way uptown with your baby. And there was, and I found this new mom support group. And in that group, we were like birth to maybe 18 months. So people were talking about what type of pumps they were using and feeding schedules. And I very, very much look forward to that meeting every week. So a lot of these things really inspired me to become a postpartum doula. As far as the leadership aspect, um, that is, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional when I think about it because it really is difficult. It's difficult when you are showing up to work and no one else has a baby. And you're saying, like, I need to leave at this time because I have to pick up my baby, or I need to go pump, or I need to cry, I need sleep. What are these things that I need? Because I am a human being that just had a baby and I really even shouldn't be back at work yet because my body hasn't had time to heal emotionally. I haven't had time to process what just happened. And I don't know that I'm truly answering the question about the leadership point. I just think there's like a big struggle and a lack of support in the workplace when it comes to becoming a mother or becoming a parent in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess for myself, because I have older kids, and then now I'm someone that I had a connection call with called it remothering because I'm basically learning everything all over again. Um, it's, going to conferences and figuring out when am I going to pump and can I even, is that something I should ask? I will ask. But if I usually do this one activity, juggling when to pump, when to pick up the baby if they're in childcare, and that's me coming from. I actually, I'm the founder of the business, and Izzy. If I told Izzy, "Hey, I got to log off early because the baby won't like it just won't calm down," she'd be fine with it. But imagine having to tell a boss that, right? And worried about your performance. How is that going to be taken? Will they take you as being less loyal or less um, interested in moving up? And so I think for myself, it's relearning flexibility and learning that it's okay to ask people if they need something, if they just, whether it is that they are remothering or they're a new mother or they're taking care of aging parents, asking them, do they need a meal to be dropped off? And helping them see that if they are business owners, that they don't have to be stuck to that 9 to 5, that they can offer themselves some flexibility and learning grace. And I think that translates into business by sometimes we don't hit our metrics. Sometimes we didn't get that client. How can we be flexible and how can we give ourselves grace? Because we can't just kind of like keep going and spinning that wheel without and expecting, I don't know, uh us to be perfect all the time. Hopefully that made sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And it's I wasn't as direct as I could have been where it is a societal issue. It's not a personal issue.
Mhm.
It is a systemic issue that we're even having the conversation about this.
Yeah.
Because in reality, women or birthing people in general, or anybody who's becoming a new parent, really need like over a year to adjust to that.
Mhm.
And we're expected to go back in much, much sooner before we're even ready, before
Yep.
our body is ready, before our mind is ready. Um, and before we even have the true like support system in place to show up in a way, like you said, to be productive, to hit all those metrics and everything. So I think like I want to make sure that people understand like it is a systemic issue. It is not a personal issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we could go into a whole another podcast episode about this and my thoughts on it, but, I'm so glad that you're part of that, um, postpartum phase, because I know how difficult it can be, and I, as a business owner, can be flexible with myself, but I worry about, all of the other people who are stuck in roles where they don't have that flexibility or that trust to relay their needs to their boss or their managers.
Yes. Yes.
Well, to completely change the subject.
Oh, we love it.
what does sustainable visibility look like for someone who still wants to grow and scale?
Um, as you can tell, I like to give examples and real life stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a friend who is in that space right now. So she is opening up a business here in Detroit. And every time she sees me, she's like, I know, I know. And I'm like, what? She's like, I know you're going to ask me what I'm doing for myself. And I said, absolutely. Because I love that you're scaling and growing your business, but I also see you like sinking and crumbling too. So it's that question for me always is a couple of questions that I ask all the time. And people who've been around me long enough know that I'm going to ask them. So one is, what are you looking forward to doing for yourself this week? The other is, what's something that brings you joy? That one is hard. And it's hard because we forget to prioritize joy when we get really busy. And the other one is, who's someone who can support you? Who's someone that you trust to ask for help? So I will share.
You're making me think about it now.
I'll share my own answers. So for me, this week, I'm looking forward to taking myself out on more walks or exploration. The weather has been a little tricky, but walks, especially at sunset, bring me a lot of joy. So like I said, I was in Ann Arbor on Sunday. That's something that brings me joy too, just exploring and saying like, oh, my kid is good for a couple hours. What am I going to do for myself? And I'm just going to leave it up to the GPS to at least get me there safely. But then for me to be open to receive whatever comes my way in a safe way. I understand that might not feel safe to some people. So that's something that brings me joy and that I'm looking forward to. I'm also moving soon. So for me, it's asking for help for things that I never considered. So not just like help to say like, hey, I'm moving, send good vibes, but there are people who are like, hey, I have a bigger vehicle that you can use. Asking at my big age, even still asking my parents to say like, hey, here's some of the things that I need for my new place. So really taking the time to say like, who can I ask for help? And what's beautiful about that question, and when you start asking for help, so many people want to help you. And they just don't sometimes know how. And even if you want to shift the messaging a little bit, because sometimes help can sound like, woe is me, who can support you? So just changing that framing of the question a little bit. Who can I ask for support?
Again, you're just making me think about it. I'm like, what things do I want to do? Do I want to read every week, or like, what is my goal? Anyway, how can someone communicate their value clearly without overextending themselves?
Without overextending themselves. I love that. That goes back to my capacity example. I feel like I don't have the capacity to do that right now. I think is my favorite line, and it's received really well. I think the other part about the overextension is more personal, to check in with yourself, to say, how am I feeling really? And slowing down enough to do that check in, to just say, you know what, actually, I've done too many things. I need to take a break, and understanding what the break looks like. I think that part is key and a little bit difficult in the beginning. So, for example, yesterday, I was sitting at this very desk and I was like, I'm starting to get a headache and I'm getting really tired. And I have some clients, but I don't have them right now. What can I do? I work from home. Guess what? I laid down. I set a timer for 30 minutes and I laid down, and I felt so much better for doing that. Not everybody has the ability to do that, right? So like, what are some other ways you can incorporate it? Is it literally going outside and getting some fresh air? Is it taking a moment to do a breathwork exercise? Like, what are some ways that we can slow down and check in with our bodies to make sure that we aren't overextending ourselves?
Awesome.
Okay, so how do you define success now compared to earlier in your career?
I love this question because it is so different. So definitely earlier in my career was the titles and societal norms. And now it's how do I feel? It truly is, how do I feel, and how do I feel about myself? Am I being authentic to who I am? Am I able to truly show up as my authentic self? As you both know, when we're in corporate spaces, when we're in like very non spaces that necessarily weren't created for us as women, for women of color, for folks of color. We don't typically get to show up as our authentic self. So for me, it is, how do I feel? Am I able to show up as my authentic self, even in this moment, to say the things that I'm saying, to recommend a book like Original Sins? I never would have been able to do that before. So really saying, like, am I truly honoring Ashley?
So for someone who feels stuck in burnout, what's the first mindset shift that they would need to make in order to get out or start the process of getting out of burnout?
So one thing is burnout thrives in isolation. So really making sure that we are in community and that we're getting support. Another mindset shift is that it's not personal. It's not some failure on our part. We are operating in a society that thrives off of hustle culture, but also doesn't address that there's a systemic advantage that people have, that they said that they've worked really hard, but they maybe had a trust fund or someone who funded their college education or someone who paid for their business to get started. And they're not necessarily even acknowledging that that happened. They're just saying, I worked really hard for this thing. So recognizing that it is not personal, and that it takes time to heal from burnout. It takes time for burnout to happen, and it takes time. I'm still healing. And that I took that leave of absence at the end of 2023. So recognizing that it takes time, and that's okay.
All right. Ashley, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
So I am on Instagram at burn.bright.not.out. Gotta love Instagram for trying to find the name that you want. And on LinkedIn at Ashley Burton-Mims. I'm one of one, so I'm very, very easy to find on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, you're going to get a little bit different content. So it will be very similar to Instagram, but in a little bit longer format. And then on my website, emeraldandrose.com, you can sign up for our newsletter there. And yeah, those are the main places. There's a couple of events that are coming up as well. So one is the Slow Down Summit at the end of April in Columbus, Ohio. And then at the end of June, I'll be at the Weld Conference, also in Columbus at Otterbein. So those are two speaking engagements that I have coming up as well.
Awesome. And then as we ask all of our guests on the podcast, how do you market like it's hot?
I love that. I definitely am. Oh, I love this question. Trying to be more present on Instagram, definitely. I was doing a really good job, and then I'm still doing a good job. And I took a little sabbatical from that to focus on, which we didn't talk about today, but we had a series this winter called the Hibernation series. And so that was a 4-part series really focused on having a wintertime mindset, embracing the fact that it is winter, and it started at the beginning of winter and it concludes this Saturday for the first day of spring. So that was a big undertaking. So I did have to step back a little bit from that. But yeah, I think I'm answering my market like it's hot.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Market Like It's Hot. If this conversation challenged how you think about burnout, leadership, or how you show up for your business, send this episode to someone who needs to hear it. You can connect with Ashley and explore her work, workshops, and postpartum support services through her Linktree. And if you want to take a closer look at your own marketing, grab our complimentary marketing worksheet at myrebelmarketing.com/checklist. It'll help you figure out what is working, what's not, and what to fix next. You can also find us on LinkedIn at Rebel Marketing and tell us what the worst piece of marketing advice you have ever received is. And until next time, stay strategic, stay spicy, and never settle for boring. If words have come out of my mouth today correctly. And thank you, Ashley, again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.